Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, adopted by General Assembly Resolution 61-106 of December 13, 2006. Article 1. The purpose of this convention is to promote, protect and ensure the full and equal enjoyment by all persons with disabilities of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, as well as to promote respect for their inherent dignity. Persons with disabilities include persons with persistent physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairments that, when interacting with various barriers, may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Article 2. Definitions. For the purposes of this convention, communication includes the use of languages, texts, braille, tactile communication, large font, accessible multimedia, as well as printed materials, audio media, ordinary language, readers, as well as reinforcing and alternative methods and formats of communication, including accessible information and communication technologies. Language includes speech and sign languages, as well as other forms of non-speech languages. Discrimination on the basis of disability means any distinction, exclusion or restriction on the basis of disability, the purpose or result of which is to diminish or deny recognition, realization or exercise on an equal basis with others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil or any other field. It includes all forms of discrimination, including denial of reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation means making, when necessary in a particular case, necessary and appropriate changes and adjustments that do not become a disproportionate or unjustified burden in order to ensure the realization or exercise by persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Universal design means the design of objects, environments, programs and services designed in such a way as to make them as convenient as possible for all people without the need for adaptation or special design. The universal design does not exclude assistive devices for certain groups of people with disabilities, where necessary. Article 3. General Principles. The principles of this convention are: A. Respect for the inherent dignity of a person, his personal independence, including the freedom to make his own choice and independence. B. Non-discrimination. C. Full and effective involvement and integration into society. D. Respect for the characteristics of persons with disabilities and recognition of them as a component of human diversity and part of humanity. E. Equality of opportunity. F. Accessibility. G. Equality of men and women. H. Respect for the developing abilities of children with disabilities and respect for the right of children with disabilities to preserve their individuality. Article 4. General Obligations. 1. The participating states undertake to ensure and promote the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities without discrimination on the basis of disability. To this end, the states parties undertake to: A. Take all appropriate legislative, administrative and other measures to implement the rights recognized in this convention. B. Take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to amend or repeal existing laws, regulations, customs and practices that discriminate against persons with disabilities. C. Integrate the protection and promotion of the human rights of persons with disabilities into all policies and programs. D. Refrain from any actions or methods that are incompatible with this convention and ensure that public authorities and institutions act in accordance with this convention. E. Take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability by any person, organization or private enterprise. F. To conduct or encourage research and development of goods, services, equipment and items of universal design, defined in Article 2 of this convention, the adaptation of which to the specific needs of a disabled person would require as little adaptation and minimal costs as possible, to promote their accessibility and use, as well as to promote the idea of universal design in the development of standards and guidelines principles. G. Conduct or encourage research and development, and promote the availability and use of new technologies, including information and communication technologies, vehicles, devices and assistive technologies suitable for persons with disabilities, with priority given to low-cost technologies. H. Provide persons with disabilities with accessible information on means of transportation, devices and assistive technologies, including new technologies, as well as other forms of assistance, support services and facilities. I. Encourage the training of professionals and staff working with persons with disabilities on the rights recognized in this convention in order to improve the provision of assistance and services guaranteed by these rights. 2. With regard to economic, social and cultural rights, each state party undertakes to take measures, making the maximum use of its available resources and, if necessary, resorting to international cooperation, to progressively achieve the full realization of these rights, without prejudice to those obligations set out in this convention that are directly applicable in accordance with international law. 3. In developing and applying legislation and strategies aimed at implementing this convention and in other decision-making processes on issues related to persons with disabilities, states parties shall consult closely with persons with disabilities, including children with disabilities, and actively involve them through their representative organizations. 4. Nothing in this convention affects any provisions that are more conducive to the realization of the rights of persons with disabilities and may be contained in the laws of a state party or the norms of international law in force in that state. No restriction or derogation of any human rights and fundamental freedoms recognized or existing in any state party to this convention by virtue of law, conventions, rules or customs is permitted under the pretext that this convention does not recognize such rights or freedoms or that they are recognized in it in accordance with a smaller scope. 5. The provisions of this convention shall apply to all parts of federal states without any restrictions or exceptions.